Hey, everybody, welcome to the NYC Real Estate Podcast. I'm Mark Levine. I'm your host. This is episode 81, and I am super excited to have the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings, Ahmed Tigani, joining us today. We're super excited. This is the big fish moment for this podcast, and we've been building up with some great guests over the last few years, and I'm very excited. And before I get to Commissioner Tigani, I just also want to remind everybody that you can email the show at nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. That's nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. And just on the side, I just launched a new software platform for buildings in New York City called Manage Your Building. So I have a vested interest, but I am going to sponsor today's episode by manageyourbuilding.com. I would love for everybody to go check it out. And why don't we turn over to the guest of the hour, Commissioner Tigani? Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. And I've never been anyone's big fish, so this is definitely an honor.
I think you're being very under the radar on that, and I certainly appreciate that. Before we get into the thought process of what I wanted to speak to you about, I'd love to just take a minute or two to go through, obviously you're the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings. It really is the top end of that organization within the government here in New York City. I would just love a little bit of a background on your education and just how you got to where you are, and what are the tools that you've used so far that you have from your past in today's world of overseeing the department.
Uh, well, I am first and foremost a born and raised New Yorker, which, New Yorkers come in many different stripes and backgrounds, but I'm very proud of having deep Brooklyn roots, and always having been in this city and loving this city is an honor of a lifetime to be able to serve this city in this position and other positions that I've held. The way I got into this work, some of it is personal, some of it is through discovery of a love for the professional and operational aspects of how the built environment, land use, and development works. But as a young man growing up in Brooklyn in a family with single mom, two kids, we depended not only on our neighborhoods and my mom's ingenuity and ability to deliver for our family, but there were times when we really needed to have the city support us. And I got to see firsthand the social safety net of the city, whether it was our cash assistance or rental assistance or help trying to get healthcare services for my sister and myself. I was able to see public servants who stepped up time and time again. And those people honestly became heroes in my eyes. They were the people who provided us with the ability to feel secure at the end of the day. And growing up, I always had deep respect, either because of the role they played in my life in that way, or growing up in a working class neighborhood in Brooklyn. My neighbors were the ones who were coming home from these offices, or they were cops, or they were firemen. They were playing these essential roles. And so I just grew and was surrounded by these like municipal heroes. And I just wanted to be part of that. I always wanted to be part of that. And going into undergrad, I focused on a lot of different things. I had a love for sort of the creative arts, and I worked behind stage in theater, but at the same time focused on public policy, and moved that into starting my first foray into city government, which was the Department of Cultural Affairs. And while there, I really started to see that we were a city of so many different points of views, but everyone wanted to see a city that was investing in growth that not only focused on Manhattan and the main and that borough, but wanted to see the outer boroughs really grow and prosper and get their deserved future. And so I learned about what were the different practices and applications that got people there, and I fell into urban planning, and I went to grad school, and I built work and internships and jobs around different parts of the urban planning landscape, but really focused on housing and development. I worked out of grad school, came to work for a couple of nonprofits who were doing economic development plans, but then ultimately moved into the political space. I started my first government job from DCLA in the city council, working on housing policy and housing advocacy, then moved as legislative director. From there to Manhattan Borough President's Office as assistant director of land use, planning, and development. From there, I was at City Hall under the de Blasio administration, in the de Blasio administration, as a senior advisor on land use, planning, development, and labor unions for the Intergovernmental Affairs Shop for 2 years. Came to DOB during my first stint here as chief of staff for then Commissioner Melanie LaRocca, and that was an incredible 2 years. Also years where we were navigating the COVID pandemic. Left DOB to go be deputy commissioner for the Office of Neighborhood Strategies at Housing Preservation and Development. And if you're not familiar with that team, that's the team that does all the work around the disposition and the management of public land, the RFPs for creating new developments of housing on public land. They focus on the climate and the resiliency and technical work around zoning that HPD does. Eventually became the first deputy commissioner and an acting commissioner last year. And then at the beginning of this year, I was truly honored when the mayor asked me to come back to DOB and serve as commissioner. And so, over that arc, I've focused mostly on zoning, planning, climate, sustainability, resiliency, focused on code and zoning from a legislative and legal perspective, and worked on policy, community relations, and building those relationships with the major stakeholders from community organizations to the development community to labor and workforce development, all trying to bring those skills now to this opportunity here at DOB.
That's great. So thank you for the background. You went to Hunter College, right? For your studies?
I'm whatever the version of super booster is in the community world, but I am a Hunter Hawk. I bleed purple, despite what my doctor says. I think that's probably not helping. Yeah, Hunter College undergrad, and I went back for grad school. And I actually sit on there's an alumni urban planning council, and I'm still very close to that department.
Oh, that's great. I also did the CUNY system. I went to Baruch and I was in their real estate development program.
That's a great program.
Yeah, it was honestly, while it was kind of not really related to the management side that I do because it was more on the development side, I still feel that there's like key moments of that 3 to 4 year process that I still have every day within my just working world. And it was having that available to me was great. I always thought that the value for CUNY was beyond measure. I mean, I went first to Ohio State and then I transferred out, and CUNY was absolutely, for me, 10 times harder and more important to do the work there at a fraction of the price. So I will never speak poorly about CUNY. I have nothing but good things to say about that. And my dad actually went to Baruch too, and I think my grandfather as well. So it's all in the family. Third generation.
I mean, and this no shit. There are some really great schools that we work with now at DOB, but I will say that some of my real world influences, people I still talk to, who went to Hunter, a lot of them stayed in the city or were from the city and focused their career in the city. There was certainly this feeling of obligation and commitment and loyalty to the future of this city, and it refreshed me and gave me passion when I was like side by side with them in the classroom, and now in the real world when I interact with them out in the professional setting, I still get that like same juice. I get that same vibe when we come together and talk. The CUNY keeps on giving over and over again.
Yeah, and that, before we move on, that is one of my real wants with and work. I'm trying to work that out by reaching out to Baruch, but I would love to have the opportunity to go into a class and teach people about my side of real estate, which is purely management, because I think that there's a lot of people that are interested in that and seeing it, and also seeing it from both the rental side, from the tenant's perspective. I know you were with HPD, so your mind is on that too. So what I really wanted to focus on today is because it's pretty interesting. I have two sides of my portfolio that are relevant to, I mean, it's all relevant to DOB, but it's relevant in different ways. I have one, which is the co-op condo side, which is primarily buildings that are greater than the 25,000 square foot. So for years, we've been dealing with every year, the energy grades and the benchmarking, the local law 87s, and then the 97s have come out. But we also have a secondary portfolio, which may also tie into a lot of our listeners, where it could be mixed use residential, and it could be smaller than 25,000 square feet. So I would love to know, as part of our discussion, how you guys approach with the Climate Mobilization Act and with where the city is going to go as energy efficient as possible. I understand new construction has now basically phased out anything but electric. You have to for heating systems and cooling systems. That's there, but for existing buildings that are under 15,000 square feet or 25,000 square feet. Has the department ever thought about where that's headed in the next few years, and how can we prepare ourselves for the world where it's not just the benchmark is at the 25,000, but now it's relevant to everybody under?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it this way. I think taking a step back, local law 97 is local law 97, has certain parameters. Those buildings that meet that criteria have to meet those standards. And even in that universe, we've been making significant progress in trying to develop a framework that's not about punitive action. It is both about trying to get compliance, which at the end of the day is really what we care about most, making sure that people have not only gone to compliance, but they feel supported and have clear direction, and they have someone they can go to with questions to help figure out how to get to compliance. It's the reason why I believe that we are at 93% of compliance in the first reporting period. And that was not because we went in with plan A and we said, this is what we're sticking to. We're not going to listen and get feedback and understand what the community needs. It was because when we initially started that process, we started to develop and ramp up the work that we're doing to educate service providers, our outreach and direct contact with building owners who were trying to navigate and figure out how to do this stuff. We were creating new platforms like the and as a city, NYC Accelerator, the Building Energy Exchange. We were the CUNY Sustainability Center. We were figuring out how to use these tools not only to give education, but they were building out technical assistance, connecting them to contractors and material developers and device developers to help them figure out what implementation they could do. We were also looking at ways to look at our own compliance timeline. Many people remember that we moved our reporting requirement last year back 6 months because we heard feedback that people were working through different ideas and they were seeing a way forward, but they needed more time. And so these things in combination really helped get to a place where I think the communication was clear. We just want them to be in compliance, and we'd help them figure out how the rule works to get there. And that, for the most part, is helped us with other buildings that may not fall into that criteria, but are really interested in meeting sustainability goals and being part of the solution. So the NYC Accelerator, the information is generated, the green economy and industry of producers, contractors, everyone in that space is now available to those buildings that feel like they want to be part of the solution as well. And there are like other local laws that may apply to them, but when it comes to sustainability and efficiency, there are other reasons beyond local laws. maybe it's your your energy bills, maybe it's your insurance requirements, maybe if you're a co-op and from a public policy perspective, you as a building want to contribute differently than what we're seeing, right? The emissions from buildings make up 70% of the gas that we're trying to defeat, and there are buildings that want to do differently. It would have been harder for them if we didn't spend this time as a city in investing and growing this market. The other thing I would say is that when you look at larger buildings versus lower buildings, smaller buildings, even in the way we treat some of the facade work, right? So for buildings above 7 stories, you have local law 11. For smaller buildings, you have the parapet annual observation, which again is trying to get to some of the same issue. It's easier to do. Owners can do it themselves. It improves public safety. Again, it's looking at the way that we've shaped and formulated these laws and trying to rationalize it for the size building that the law is trying to help protect or make safe.
So you make a good point with the parapet inspections. I have a lot of buildings that are not in the program of the FISP, Facade Inspection Safety Program, which would not require them to do the every 5-year inspection. So I know that we're in the 3rd year coming up of the parapets, which we do portfolio wide, of course, as is required. And I always thought that that was really good because what I have found and what I've advised my clients always, even on the smaller buildings, is you still have an obligation to keep your building safe. You can't have any unsafe conditions that are going to jeopardize the general public safety or staff or residents of the building. So having the parapet inspection, I think, is the first point. And I always tell everybody, if you're a smaller building, just act as if you're not filing the report technically with the Department of Buildings for the facade inspection, but you should be at least aware of what's going on. And there are a lot of smaller buildings that I've seen or privately held where landlords have been there for 30, 40 years, and maybe deferred maintenance has kind of caught up. But I've also seen co-ops on the same side. So it's not really relevant to one type of ownership. It's just a matter of being smart about when you do the inspections and when you do the work so that you don't find yourself 10, 15, 20 years later with unsafe conditions, and now all of a sudden you have to spend an inordinate amount of money, and it puts pressure on everybody. It's not just the landlord that feels the pressure. If it's a market rate, it goes down. It's a trickle down effect. So what we can do as, I guess, operators and managers is just to have more of a common sense approach to making sure if you see something, say something, have it inspected, work with those architects and engineers that you trust for that. And then we want to avoid no offense, but we want to avoid having the Department of Buildings come out and issue a violation. We want to get ahead of it.
Yeah. Right? No, I want you to avoid that too.
Okay, yeah.
We do hundreds of thousands of inspections every year, and that workload is a lot for us to manage. It's a lot for the community to. When I say community, the broader building ownership community to have to absorb as well. And the fewer negative interactions that we can have, if everyone has more information and able to manage those responsibilities, the better. I mean, let's put it all on the table. It's owners have a lot to comply with. I'm not saying anything or breaking any news. We know that these are a lot of requirements. They are there to make people safe and sustainable and to make the city livable, but it's a lot for owners. And we try to get that information and make sure people know what they have to comply with. I mean, just in the next couple, this year into next year, you've got, the local law 97 reporting, gas piping, annual elevator inspections, boiler inspections, retaining walls, gas detector requirement coming up on January 1, and then the sidewalk shed enforcement, which is its own particular piece that buildings are in and out of having to manage. So, this is just some of the things that are on their plate. I think at the end of the day, hearing from the community more about what we can do to be a partner in helping them information manage this, get clarity on where things are unclear, and empower property property managers and building service workers who are doing the frontline work on this so that they're not getting these negative visits from the department. And in fact, when they hear from us, it's in response to a question that they have or something we can do to help them with their calendar planning and system planning.
How, since it's interesting that you were on both sides of the coin with HPD and also with DOB. How closely do you work with the commissioner of HPD per se to say, okay, we're experiencing, this issue. Obviously, I feel like, as an example, we had the garage collapse a few years ago, which led to, or may not have led to, I think they were still in the pipeline at around the same time, but it expedited the garage inspections. We had the gas explosions, which leads to the 152. And then we'd had somebody, I believe it was children that were playing with the stove, and the stove caught on fire up in, I think it was up in Harlem, that led to the stove knob covers through HPD. Like, how much interaction do you guys have together to maybe not plan out obviously the same laws and rules, but if something happens in a building and is there a round table of sorts where the agencies get, because I've never played that inside baseball, I just don't understand how you all work together to carve out these programs and these laws and rules. How often do you get together? Is it something that is a long-term view, or is it more reactionary to the moments? Like, I would love for you to lay that out, and as much as you would like.
Yeah, no, I listen. The short answer is constantly. Both HPD and DOB, put aside anyone who's in these particular chairs, are constantly working together, and this comes because in our DNA, at one point, 5 decades ago, we were in many parts. Many of the parts were together. It was in the late '70s that parts of DOB and HPD were reshaped into the agencies you see today. So in our genetics, we are inclined to be in constant conversation and talk together, particularly around the enforcement and safety of buildings and the occupants. But even more so, I think over the last couple of years, thinking about the kind of changes that have a positive effect on growth and development, HPD and DOB has worked very closely together. If you think about City of Yes or the state changes to the multiple dwelling law, office to residential conversion, basement and basement and cellar apartment conversions, all of this is only possible with both HPD and DOB with sister agencies like the Department of City Planning as well, working together, comparing notes, figuring out the operational changes, the legal changes, the financial impacts. All of those analyses can't happen without all of those different agencies weighing in. And it points to how what very smart of this administration to put the Department of Buildings in the housing and planning portfolio. Historically, DOB sat in the portfolio for the Deputy Mayor of Operations, and that made sense. That makes sense for a lot of reasons. We still, in addition to our day-to-day responsibility in issuing permits and doing our regular code enforcement work, we have a key role in emergency response. On any given day, you're seeing a dozen or so different kinds of emergencies, from very small scale to very serious. And DOB staff is deployed to go do an analysis on a structural integrity check, or having to go look to see, after there's a fire, the conditions of inside the building or the facade on the outside of the building. And so we keep a very close relationship with operations. But now in the housing and planning portfolio, we are firmly within the framework of agencies that are thinking about, how do we build the city that New Yorkers need faster? How do we build it in a more equitable way? How do we make sure that people have access to services by delivering the hospital seats and school seats and housing units that this mayor has made sure is a top priority for the administration? But the other part of it that's really important to note is that we're not at all saying that you need to do this and undermine safety. In fact, in the housing plan, we point out that we're going to launch a new committee on construction safety, a new task force bringing together the Deputy Mayor Sue, the Deputy Mayor for Economic Justice, Deputy Mayor Bozorg, Housing and Planning, and DOB, and we are going to center safety in our plan that will ultimately also lead to expediting and creating more housing units. So we work all the time together. It is in our DNA. We are thinking and talking through legislation constantly, and from a framework structural perspective in this administration, HPD and DOB are lined up right next to each other under one deputy mayor, thinking together about how to execute the plans and the vision of this mayor.
So you mentioned something interesting in that explanation, and thank you for that, about office to residential conversion. I know recently at 235 East 42nd Street, there was the issue that you had been dealing with over the past few weeks, and I could tell you that made obvious national news. And I think you were a mainstay on all the media channels, whether it was radio or if it was TV. So we got a lot of information publicly, beyond, of course, the reporting. So how does this lead the city and your view in the future of the residential conversions from office to residential? What does the landscape look like now that you have gone through that and experienced probably not the worst case. The worst case didn't happen, thankfully. But having gone through that experience and now what you know, where does that leave us for the future of that?
Well, I think first and foremost, I never want to miss any opportunity to express my tremendous gratitude to the first responders who went on that site and figured out what the situation needed, which was the full-scale response of the city's emergency response agencies. And when we got to that building and saw what the situation is and was able to evaluate what information we need to understand was there movement, where the emergency situation was located, and how we needed to intervene in that moment to protect people, FDNY, OEM, NYPD, my colleagues here at the Department of Buildings, people stepped up and they made sure that not only was a controlled situation, but to your point, what people wanted was information. They wanted to have clear updates on what was going on and what was the status of that area for people to be able to know and plan for and make arrangements. And on those notes, I really feel like we succeeded and hit all our targets. Moving forward after that day, you can see that not only were we focused with the owner on stabilizing and restoring normality to that area, but we continued what is now still an ongoing investigation, and will continue to come back to the public with updates. Just recently, we talked about the completion of the first sweep of sites that have associations with the ownership of that building. And what it showed was that after 180 site visits, we did not see any hazardous or structural issues on these other sites. It showed about 65 oath violations, 18 partial stop work orders, 1 full stop work order. And then when you drill down deeper in that, we looked at specifically office to residential conversions. And in that, we only found 3 violations and 1 partial stop work order. So as a ratio of the whole, there were far fewer issues that we were seeing. Pulling back, office residential conversions in itself is not something we believe was a contributor to whatever we determine is the outcome here. In fact, there are construction issues that happen. We have to take them seriously. We have to investigate and intervene. But when we're talking about office to residential conversion, this is something that's been happening in New York City for decades. We recognize how key it will be to delivering housing, which is why over the last couple of years, through zoning and code changes and state support and legislative changes, we have now made it possible. We've also more possible to do that work. We worked with the council on thinking about how those conversions could work, and we had input with them. A lot of partners have been brought in to figure out how to move forward. So when we're thinking about complex enlargements, we are also looking at the specialties that we've applied to make sure that they were evaluated safely. And in this case, we have our development hub that works directly with owners who are going through this work, that provides expert level of review and helps navigate and figure out what the right steps are to take to make sure these buildings are safely done. And I would say my last note is when you're dealing with office buildings, many office buildings are steel frame. Many office buildings have large floor plates. Many office buildings have been designed so that they can be molded and modified for different tenants that come in, which lend themselves as a structure as maybe more prepared for major renovations and adjustments and other buildings. So as a whole, you're dealing with a strong stock. You just have to make sure that you are approaching your construction project as proved, properly phased and planned with the right procedures and protocols in place.
That's great. Well, I know you're a busy man. I don't want to take up more of your time. I thought that this was such an excellent half hour for me to learn a little bit more about you and also about how the department is handling a lot of these issues. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It's great to have an in, to have at least have met you. And if we ever, have anything, of course, we call 311. But any time that I could get the ear of somebody in a position as yours, I'm very grateful for that, for everything that you do for the city. And I know that you guys have your hands full, and every day is different for you, I'm sure, just as it is for me. There's no 2 days alike.
It's what makes the job great. And you know what? I appreciate what you're doing here. I mean, these are great venues for people to really understand more about how not only government runs, but this is a credible city of over 1.1 million buildings. We have over 45,000 active construction sites. There's a lot of work happening out there, and the more we talk about what we need to do it safely and to do more of it, the better.
That's it. That's the whole point. Just keep it safe and keep it legit and legal. So, Commissioner Tigani, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. And until we speak next time.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.